The fight of the gods. Because the Muslims were plowing the wombs of their wives frequently, there became more and more and more. Even as God Yahweh was quite far away in his heaven, he could still hear the constant shouting on earth, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. Yahweh became angry. He could not tolerate any longer this eternal offense of Allah. I am the greatest. And so he decided to hold him accountable. He sent his archangel Gabriel to Allah's heaven and said, tell him he should order his bearded followers to stop shouting Allahu Akbar. When Allah heard God's message, he became angry and shouted, Ha! Who does that old man think he is? Why should I stop my followers to shout Allahu Akbar? I am the greatest. That is the truth. So Allah rushed over to the Christian heaven. As everybody knows, each religion has its own heaven. Then he confronted God. What do you think? I shall forbid my believers to call me the greatest God? I am the greatest, and you know it. You tell your Christians they are not allowed to translate God as Allah in their publications. Allah is only for my Muslims. God said calmly, Allah is just the Arabic word for God, nothing special. No, it is the only God, the God of Islam. It is just a contraction of from Al-Ilah, which means the God. And that comes from the Aramaic word Elah, but its emphatic state is Elah, meaning simply God. And it is the Hebrew word Elohim for God. So the Arabs borrowed your name from the Jews. Ah, no! I never will take anything from the Jews. I have even more names, not just Allah. I have 99 names which you don't know. The best names, the most beautiful names. Among the 99 names, the most famous are the merciful, the compassionate, the one, the unique, the single. God said, and only the camels know your 100th name because they are stupid enough. God tried to laugh, but he was not very accustomed to do that. Allah became so enraged that he could not answer. So God went on. In Arabia, Al-Ilah was in use for centuries before Muhammad appropriated it for his invented religion. You were only one of the 360 gods worshipped in the Kaaba in Mecca. You had even 3 daughters. Muhammad chose Allah as the only God and rejected your daughters. Allah recovered his speech. I am totally different from you. Allah and Yahweh are not just 2 names for the same God. You claim that Jesus is your son. A God having a son in Islam is the greatest of all sins. I have never had any children. I'm absolute oneness. If you and me are different, how can I be the father of that Jesus Christ? The real God cannot die on a cross, so Jesus could not be divine. And once a man is dead, he cannot resurrect from the grave. Jesus cannot be God, nor can you as a God be a father. Therefore, I, Allah, cannot be the same as you, the God of the Bible. I, Allah, am the unique, omnipotent and only deity and creator of the universe. God became angry and shouted, "No! I am the unique, omnipotent and only deity and creator of the universe." Allah said, "No, I am unique, all mercifully omnipotent. There is no Trinity. I alone am. There are no other gods around me. I have no son. I have no children. I do not have any companions." The little angels who were watching the scene from the great window in heaven giggled. "How sad! You must feel very lonely. God, give him some angels so he is not so alone." That enraged Allah. He was always extremely serious, never laughed. Allah stepped close to Yahweh and shouted, "Either I, Allah, am the true God, or you, Yahweh, are the true God." An angel said laughingly, "Oh, none of you is the true God, because both cannot be true." God said, "But if we are different, which one is the true God?" "Me, of course, I am the only God." "No, I am the only God. I am who I am. You, Allah, consider yourself to be too holy to have any personal relationship with man. Don't tell me that you are personally interested in man's problems. You even drowned them in the big flood. I have sent prophets to reveal my will, and I have inspired the holy book, the Bible, to guide the lives of men. And I have sent the last prophet, Muhammad, the seal. No other prophet will come after him. And I have sent the angel Gabriel to dictate him my book, the Quran, which is without any error. Your Bible is full of contradictions." "Huh? Why Gabriel? This angel is from my tradition. Could you not invent any other messenger? And where's your book now from which he read?" "With me in heaven. My book, the Quran, I have revealed to Muhammad word for word directly from heaven. Therefore, it contains no error. But your Bible is full of errors and contradictions. The Bible is falsified." And then why did Muhammad plunder it? "He only corrected it." There is nothing to correct. My book is perfect. My religion, the Islam, is a religion of peace and tolerance. I even tolerate you. I want peace, nothing but peace. I never take up a weapon." The angels laughed. God said, "For insulting my glory and honor of God, for not being the only true God, I demand satisfaction from you." And he signed his demand with an insulting gesture by throwing a cross before Allah. Allah kicked it away with the point of his foot. Then the two stopped stubborn gods were so opposed in their claims, he neither wanted to give in any way, and the quarrels could not be resolved in any other form. The last resort to find the truth, which of them was the greatest, was a duel. Since all the talking had helped nothing, now their weapons should speak. The duel should be a divine judgment. By proving their respective divine powers, an unmistakable judgment should be reached. Allah said to God, "Since statement stands against statement, it can only be clarified by a fight. Which of us is the greatest? Let us fight it out. Who is the greatest? So I challenge you to a duel. And no one should fight for you this time. You have to defend yourself, sword in hand, and immediately." God was frightened. He had never fought himself, but had always let others fight for him. So he exclaimed, "Wait, I need a second." God knew that Allah is a great deceiver, but the good God was too naive to see it. So he sent an angelic messenger to Satan to ask him to assist him in this divine duel as a second, because Satan knew all the foul tricks Allah could use. Allah did the same and called Shaitan as his second. When Satan came, he said to God, "Allah is a notorious deceiver. He even deceives his loyal followers. He would also use his tactics of cunning, taqiyya, in this duel. He as reaches as a snake. Do not trust Allah. Allah will try everything to outwit you. There is no honest fight for him. Therefore be on your guard. There will never be peace between you and him. But he cannot outwit me. I myself am well versed in all tricks." God said to Satan, "I refuse the challenge. This Allah is not recognized as a gentleman. He is not equal to my divine status. He as a god is much inferior to me. He is only a god from the desert, a nomadic god. I only fight with my equals." Satan advised God against it. "I advise you not to withdraw from this demand for a duel. If you refuse, you run the risk of being despised by your faithful followers as dishonorable and powerless. This could be interpreted as cowardice in the face of the enemy." God said, "But I can honorably refuse because of the great difference in age. I'm much older than he is." Satan said, "With even such an argument, you may not escape to be seen as a coward." God replied, "One has honor or not. It cannot be enforced by force." God had something against duels. For him, the duel was an invention of the devil, who also wins the downfall of the soul, so the bloody murder of the body. But this time God could not avoid the duel. If he did not want to be seen as a weakling or a coward, So he finally said, "Well, for the sake of my glory, I accept the fight." Satan, who knew that God, the God of love, lacked the aggressiveness necessary for a battle, so he first wanted to negotiate with Satan, the second of Allah. He said, "Let's talk about the possibility of a peaceful settlement." But Satan said decisively, "No, Allah insists on the fight." Satan failed to persuade Satan to avoid the fight, so he said, "Well, then, let us agree on the terms for the duel. Let us set the rules. If one of the two becomes incapacitated, the fight will be stopped. The duel should be ended as soon as one of them could not fight anymore." Shaitan said, "No, Allah always wants to fight to the death." Satan said, "That cannot be. Remember, God is immortal. In this case, the goal of the fight cannot be the death of the opponent. Since both are immortal as gods, and no sword can kill them. Only the unbelief of man can kill a god." Satan understood this. He said, "Well, until incapacitation. Then the fight will be stopped. But Allah insists, whoever loses the battle shall have his right hand cut off." Okay, yes. Another rule, hitting below the waist to the private parts is forbidden. And Shaitan said, "No refreshment should be served." Satan said, "Now let us prepare the ground. This should be a place between heaven and earth, so the holy heaven would not be spoiled." A battle ring was formed with extinct stars. Satan said, "This is called the field of honor." And what weapons should be used? Satan said, "For Allah, of course. Only the sword comes into question. These new modern noisy things which they call pistols, Allah, understandable, cannot handle. The swords must be exactly the same for both fighters." Satan said, "No, God will choose his sword suitable to him." Satan said, "Allah will choose, of course, a scimitar sword." And God? Scimitars are not allowed in heaven. But where could God get a sword so quickly? Heaven had become very peaceful after the great struggle and expulsion of Satan. There were no more weapons available. Then God remembered the flaming swords. After the expulsion of Adam and Eve from paradise, God had equipped the cherubims with flaming swords to guard the gates to paradise and not let anyone in who would try to nibble on the tree of eternal life. But who wanted to enter this paradise? Paradise was too boring. The whole world outside was more entertaining. God shouted to the back, "Michael, bring me the flaming sword from the gate of paradise." The archangel Michael rushed away to paradise. He had to wring the sword out of the hand of the sleeping cherubim. In no time, he was back. The sword had a flamed blade. But after his long time in front of the paradise, it was quite burned down. But small flames were still flickering along the cutting edge. Shaitan, Allah's second brother, flashing sword of triple-hardened Damascus steel. Would it be able to resist the flaming sword? But God was no longer a God of war, but an effeminate God of love. And so he was afraid to take a sword in his hand, which he, anyway, had never done before. He had always let others fight for him. Therefore he suggested to Allah, let us fight with the sword of the Spirit. That is more appropriate for us. But since Allah had little spirit, he preferred to trust in the power of the sword, and with success. After all, his faith was imposed on the people by fire and sword, and not by spiritual insight. So he said, "No, I insist on the sword." Before starting the duel, Allah was dancing a wild sword dance, yielding his brilliant sword to frighten God. He shouted, "I am the tremendous, the mighty one, the only one." But Satan interrupted him. We know that. Now let us begin. Satan said, "You both must share the sun. Stand sideways to the sun so that neither has an advantage." Allah complained. "He should not be allowed to use his gloriole. The light blinds me." Well said, "The gloriole is part of me. I cannot take it off." In order to avoid the fight with the sword, God proposed a divine judgment. Allah asks suspiciously, "What?" God said, "The ordeal of the cross. Here, I put a big cross in the star floor. Without my crucified son Jesus on it, of course, because he has long been in heaven. Both of us, you and I, stand before the cross with arms raised. The first whose arms sink has lost." But Allah firmly rejected this. "Ha! I will never stand before a cross, and certainly not with my arms raised, because that could be interpreted as my worshipping of this Jesus." Then God suggested another ordeal. Let us eat a host. One will be poisoned with the spittle of Satan, the other not. As God was omniscient, he would have known which host was poisoned. So Allah rejected that proposal too. "I will never eat such a stuff." Allah became impatient. "These are all unnecessary distractions. Let us start the fight." Before engaging in the duel, God charged his sword with spiritual power. Allah said to his sword, "Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar." Satan knitted God's long beard into the braid so that he would not get entangled in the sword. Satan and Shaitan each took a long pole in their hands. Satan said, "If one of the fighters falls or becomes incapacitated, he can ask for the pole, that I'm going to put it in between." Angels were blowing the trumpets to sign the beginning of the fight. God and Allah stood back to back. Then they walked away from each other for some steps. After the recital began, they turned and advanced towards each other, lifting their swords high in the air. Then the two gods started to fight, each trying to slash the other's face. Allah's top-knot came loose during the duel. Satan stopped the fight to give him time to bind his hair before continuing. As soon as Allah's curved sword struck God's flaming sword, its hardened steel softened and the blade bent. Since Allah was now defenseless, this was the reason to stop the duel. God approached him threateningly. "Repent, or you feel my flaming sword." Allah sank to his knees and pretended to submit. But this was only one of his cunning Dakia tricks. He said, "Let us make peace." And he stretched out his left hand to God. Satan held the pole between them and whispered to God, "Don't trust him. There is no peace with him." Then God turned away. At that moment, Allah attacked him from behind with the bent sword, but Satan put one leg in before him, so that Allah fell to the ground and twisted like a beaten snake. Allah whispered, "I love you, God." But inwardly he hated God. Then Allah pretended to be dead. God thought that he had defeated him and bent over him. But suddenly Allah jumped up again. God, frightened, fell on his knees. It looked like he was kneeling before Allah. Allah saw this with satisfaction and exclaimed, "You kneel before me, you worship me." God immediately jumped up angrily. Satan stepped between the two gods with his long stick. "Stop this useless fight." God was happy about this and said with relief, "I'm satisfied, my honor is restored." So Satan said, "I declare the duel over." But Allah said, "I'm not satisfied, my honor is not restored." So, continue. God missed his blows intentionally, showing that Allah was not worse hitting with his precious sword. Satan shouted, "No hitting in the air is allowed." Both gods were not used to move much because they were always sitting in their thrones, watching the world from above. So they became easily tired. Both were quite exhausted, though they intentionally missed their blows. They could not go on fighting for an eternity. Satan intervened. To go on fighting like this is ridiculous. This is children's play. Satan wanted to take the place of Allah because he was not able to finish the duel, but Satan stopped him. No substitute allowed. Satan intervened to separate the gods, but Allah spat on him. Satan calmly wiped the spittle off his face. God shouted, "My honor is satisfied." Satan proclaimed, "Thus the insult of honor is considered atoned for, and both parties are regarded as gods of honor in the eyes of their followers. because they have defended their honor themselves and didn't make others fight for them. Now you, God, go back to your heaven and play with your angels. And you, Allah, go back into the desert from where you came. And Satan drove with his pole the two gods from the field of honor. Then he declared, now I shall take power over the earth. Satan revived the ancient Roman goddess Moneta. Instead of the divine quarrelers and fighters, she was to be worshipped again as the goddess of money. In ancient Rome, there was a temple dedicated to the goddess Moneta. There the Romans minted their coins, hence the term monetarian, monetary. Moneta was also considered the goddess of equality, because money seemed to establish equality and thus justice. Money was community building, because all were united by the greed for money. The coins were round like the consecration cakes for the goddess. Fingering the money had a magical, religious fascination. Money has always been associated with religion. The state treasury was housed in temples. These served as banks, so to speak. Temples were treasure houses that were considered the safest place for the money of the rich. So the temples were the first financial institutions, and the priests, so to speak, the bankers. They were the treasure managers and enriched themselves in the process. The priests sold the perishable offerings such as meat and fruit that immediately bought non-perishable precious metal with the proceeds. They granted loans to finance trade. So Satan revived the old and always new goddess Moneta, whom everybody anyway always worshipped. By order of Satan, and in the name of the new yet eternally old goddess Moneta, the banks and purse were transformed into temples. Plaster statues were mass-produced and only very thinly gilded, and put into the center of the temples. During the Mass on Moneta Day, the former Monday, freshly printed banknotes fluttered out of the cornucopia between the bulging thighs of the naked goddess. Instead of a tasteless host and instead of giving alms to God, the worshippers were given money and left the temple of money apparently enriched. Initially, the faithful mistrusted these banknotes, which still smelled of printer ink. But then, blinded by the unexpected wealth, they fought over the banknotes in the delusion of suddenly becoming rich. And people could grasp as much money as they wanted. That gave the money, the worshipper, the feeling to be rich, at least for one day. But already on the next day, this holy money had lost half of its value and became more and more worthless with each passing day. It was just play money. because people did not want to kneel down to Satan, because they were afraid of their own devil inside. So Satan found a way to force them to worship him. A watermark were inserted into the paper of the banknotes. If you held it against the light, what was staring at you? The Satan's grinning face. So the people worshipped Satan whether they wanted to or not. Instead of organ music in the banks and stock exchanges, or with loudspeakers, the constant sound of ringing coins were heard. That was music in the ears of the money worshippers. Satan proclaimed in the temples of money, no one can serve two masters. Either he will cling to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and Mammon at the same time. But I advise you to serve Mammon. God rarely helps. He did not even help his son when he was crying to his father on the cross. Money, however, if you have any, is a help in all situations. Should you ever be thrown into prison? No, judges are corrupt. Trust Mammon. It is more reliable than God. It gives security in all situations of life. Thus, instead of Satan, Mammon became the true adversary of God, because all consumers are submissive to Mammon. Against all better knowledge, they buy and buy, even if they get into debt until the end of their lives. But the motto was, live now, pay later, or never. Die and leave your debts to the heirs. Satan advised, don't work by yourself. Let the money work for you. But only the rich can do this without having to work themselves. The poor cannot do that. They have to work themselves to death. And yet they never come up with a green branch. The language of religion is also the language of money. The creditor, derived from the Latin credere, to believe, believes his debtor that he will repay the borrowed money. There is a relationship of obligation between creditor and debtor. There is the fine and the church penance for turning away from God. Through repentance, the sinner tries to restore the disturbed relationship between God and himself. But now it was the disturbed relationship between the debtor and the divine bank. On their knees, repentant debtors slid across the shiny marble floor to the gilded goddess and repented for their unpaid debts. They swore high and holy that from now on they would never again be in default. Nevertheless, the debtor had to suffer a reduction in assets due to a fine to be paid. This fine was the bank's revenge on the defaulting debtor, poine in Greek. from which the pain is derived. Money and faith belong together. The value of money is based on confidence in the value of the money. Everyone must believe in the value of this worthless money, whose value is not backed by anything. As long as everyone believes in it, it retains its value. But woe when this blind faith diminishes, then these colorful banknotes are worthless paper. And so ended the fight of the gods with a happy ending. Money. People stopped singing, Allah is the greatest. Now they were singing, money is the greatest. And instead of praising God, they were praising money. And the money believers and creditors sang to the naked golden goddess, instead of our daily bread, give us our daily money. Having money, we can buy bread. No money, no bread. I believe in the value of money. It should not be devaluated. Otherwise, I will lose my investments. Not in heaven do I invest my money, because only on earth is it well invested. Moneta, I believe in you. Give me unlimited credit. You can trust me. I will pay it back if I can. Do not squeeze us with oppressive debts. Forgive us our debts. But we, as creditors, do not forgive our debtors.